But yes, I will go ahead and introduce Miriam. Miriam is such an incredible and inspiring person. Miriam actually graduated from Stanford, 2 years ago? 2 years ago now. Miriam has a really interesting story, and I'll let Miriam kind of dive a little bit more into her story, but Miriam grew up in an ultra-Orthodox community in Muncie, New York, and eventually ended up leaving the community, was in a really cool Netflix show called My Unorthodox Life. I don't know how many of you guys have seen it. Miriam is now an influencer, an activist, and feminist, and posts a lot on social media about all sorts of different issues, social issues, and also what's going on in the Middle East right now, which I'm sure everyone here has a lot of questions about because it's kind of crazy. And Miriam is really dedicated to helping her followers unpack what is going on, because you see so many different headlines and things going on campus and in the news, and I think having someone who can really break it down for you is really, really helpful. Miriam also attended a Israel-Palestine fellowship in Chicago and has led workshops about the conflict to her followers. So is very knowledgeable about all the things that we're going to be talking about today. And without any further ado, I would love to present Miriam Haart. Yay! Woo!
Thank you, Julia, for the introduction. Thank you, Stanford, everyone here for having me. Seriously, so happy to be back on campus. Today was such an incredible day. I just want to say that. I wasn't really going to come here, and the whole Stanford team made me come to Stanford and speak to you guys. And before I even go into my talk, I just want to tell you about my day. Today I met Dr. Basmalani. Does anybody know who that is? Any show of hands? Yeah? Cool, we got some hands out here. You guys also come, you can come up more if you want. I don't bite, not here. And yeah, so Dr. Basmalani, he is the director of the Iranian Studies program at Stanford. And talking to him today was just so incredible. I did a podcast episode with him a year ago about the woman life freedom movement that was happening and that is still happening. Not a lot of people are talking about it anymore, but it's still happening. And it was just so nice because speaking to someone who's from Iran, he was a professor at Stanford University during the Iranian Revolution in 1979. He's an older guy. And just talking to him and us talking about what's happening in Israel and Palestine and Lebanon and the whole Middle Eastern region and being like, yeah, and just like agreeing with everything that we're saying with each other, like, yeah, it is so crazy. Like, why are progressives acting like this? And, and like, why is this happening? And just everything is just so aligned. And he's Muslim and he's Iranian and he's from the region too. And it's just so nice to meet people that are from the Middle East, truly from the Middle East, where they grew up there. And at the end of the day, we all agree with each other. And after that, I met another friend of mine who I can't even say his name because he's from Lebanon and he's truly Lebanese. And his life is at risk, truly at risk, if he comes out and says anything positive about Israel, even in the States. His life is truly at risk because he has family in Lebanon. And if he wants to go back to Lebanon and not get killed by Hezbollah or by the people running Lebanon, he can't say anything positive about Israel, even in the States. And so him talking to me, I can't say who this person is. It was in confidence. And so it's just been so great for me being here this day, being able to talk to people that are from the Middle East, truly from the Middle East, not grandparents from the Middle East, American, but truly from the Middle East, and just realizing that as a Jew, as a Muslim, he was Druze, the person I spoke to from Lebanon, we all want the same thing, peace. We all want peace. So that's gonna be the first preface of this talk. Get my notes open. All right. Why am I here? Why do I care about this? Before I go into this talk about Israel, I want to talk a little bit about myself. And before I talk about myself, I want to talk about the mindset that I want you guys to have as I talk about this conflict, because as you know, it's been extremely, extremely divisive, what's been going on. And the best way to open up our minds and to be able to listen to what I'm about to say with an open heart and open mind is I want to talk a little bit about where I grew up. So Julia started talking about it a little bit. I grew up in an ultra-Orthodox Jewish community. This community does not represent Judaism. This community represents fundamentalism. So the community that I grew up in, women were not allowed to wear pants. So every time I wear pants in the morning, I feel super empowered. It's exciting every single time, literally every single time, which is crazy. Women weren't allowed to wear pants. Girls got married in their teenage years. My mom, my sister, my grandmother, my 4 aunts all got married between the ages of 17 and 19 years old. I'm the first girl in my family, once I hit the age of 20, most people get excited when they turn 21. For me, when I hit the age 20, I was like, that was the best year of my life because I broke that chain of teenage marriages in my family as a woman. And yeah, women couldn't sing, they're not allowed to play instruments, there's a lot of rules that were restrictive of women, and so this is the community that I grew up in. I broke out of it when I was 16 years old, and now I'm the lesbian, pants-wearing person that I am, which is super awesome. And yeah, so I grew up in this environment where everything, you were told exactly how to live your life. You were told what was right and what was wrong, it was my way or the highway. There's even a rule for what shoe you put on first, what sock you put on first, what hand you wash first. There's literally a right and wrong for every aspect of your life. And once I left this community, it was so amazing for me because I finally was able to be a part of a society where women had rights, where I was able to be whoever I wanted to be. I was able to go to Stanford and study what I wanted to study and support myself and be financially independent. And so being a part of the secular world was so exciting. What has happened and what I've seen happen in the past few years is that unfortunately in our secular society, the ways of thought that I grew up with, of right and wrong thinking, black and white thinking, have somehow penetrated into our secular world. Somehow, in this modernity, in this secularism that we have existed in, where we are fighting for equal rights, where we want everyone to be treated well, somehow we've fallen back into the dichotomy of right and wrong and black and white thinking, where there's no room for nuance and no room for complexity. And so going into this talk, this is still the introduction. Going into this talk, I want us to try to break out of this dichotomy thinking that has become very normalized in our society, very, very normalized, and try to enter into the space of uncertainty, of complexity, of nuance, of discomfort, because that is where real progress comes from, and that's real life. And so going to this talk, I just want us to try to get into this mindset. Give me like thumbs up or like yeses, verbal yeses. Are we ready for that? Yeah? All right. Cool. So let's get into it. We're here to talk about Israel. We're here to talk about the Middle East. What is Israel? So, Israel is the only Jewish majority state in the entire world. If you didn't notice, I said Jewish majority. It isn't a only Jewish state, it's a Jewish majority. There's also 20% of the people in Israel are Muslim. There's Druze in Israel. There's Christians in Israel. There's also Ethiopian Jews and Russian Jews and people from all over. When you go to Israel and you want to describe what an Israeli looks like, it's very difficult because it really is, it's a mesh of so many different cultures and people. Just like in America, where you have all sorts of different people that live there. Same thing for Israel. It's tons of people, majority Jewish. In the world, there are over 50 Muslim majority countries. Some of these Muslim majority countries are also Muslim countries, period. That means that there are no other religions in some of these Muslim countries. And then there's over 150 Christian majority countries in the world. One Jewish state, 50 Muslim, 150 Christian states in the world. Why does this tiny state that's the size of New Jersey, so think about the governor of New Jersey is pretty much Netanyahu. That's just like something just to put things into perspective. Why does this tiny state get so much hate? Why do people care about Israel? It's literally the size of New Jersey compared to the Middle East at large. But there's tons of states in the Middle East. Not just that, Israel doesn't just get so much hate, but there's also so much else going on in the world. The starvation that's happening in Yemen, the ethnic cleansing of the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar, the Yazidi enslavement in Iraq, the mass starvation in Yemen. Like I said, there's a lot of things going on in the world that's really, really bad that's happening. Why, for some reason, is this tiny Jewish state making so much news? Why do all of you guys know about what's happening here? Why does it matter so much, right? Especially in our world. Well, my grandfather, who's very, very, very religious, he likes to say that Jews make the news. That's why he thinks that we're all over the news. Jews make the news. What does that really mean? So one of the purposes of this talk is to give you guys a toolbox, a toolkit that you can take away from this to understand the conflict further outside of this conversation. And my goal is to give you the tools to understand it more. And so why are Jews making the news? Well, what does it mean for them to make the news? What's going on here? So what I want to talk about is when Jews are making the news, when Israel's making the news, is it fair criticism of Israel? Which is good. No government is perfect. Every government has problems. So criticism is okay. There's nothing wrong with criticism. But what we need to do, since this is the only Jewish state in the world, we need to understand and we need to differentiate between fair criticism of the Israeli government versus anti-Semitism. When does being anti-Israel fall into the category of anti-Semitism? And when does being anti the Israeli government fall into fair criticism? Because both can be true, right? So the goal of my talk is to explain that. And the best way to do that, and this is not from me, this is from a man named Natan Sharansky, who was a refusenik in the Soviet Union, a Jewish guy, did a lot, an academic, a really incredible person who actually was in the gulags, which is the Russian prison, for over 9 years. And then who got him out is actually Israel, who really worked to get Natan Sharansky out of Russia. So he coined the term of the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism. And the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism are delegitimization, double standard, and demonization. So before I explain what this is, if there's anything I want you guys to take away from this talk, it's remembering the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism. So can you guys repeat to me 3 Ds of anti-Semitism?
Delegitimization,
Double standard, and demonize. One more time. Delegitimization, double standards, demonization. All right, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to ask you guys this again, so really try to remember this. These are the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism. What does that mean? Well, anytime that Israel is being demonized is anti-Semitic. Anytime they're being held at a double standard compared to other countries, that's anti-Semitic. And anytime they're being delegitimized as a government, as a sovereign state, that is anti-Semitism. So that's the overall arc of being able to differentiate between criticism and what is anti-Semitism. Why is this important? Well, we all read the news. We all should now, when we read the news, when we read something about Israel, know, is this anti-Semitism or is this fair criticism? So being able to understand and have these tools helps you go moving forward, understand the conflict in a more nuanced way. So how do we do that exactly? How do we find the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism? The way I'm going to explain that is this talk is too long. I'm going to just do this for a couple different things. One, the biggest one I think, is genocide. I'm sure we all have heard Israel is committing a genocide. This has been the accusation of Israel. So let's break it down. Is this fair criticism of Israel, or is this a double standard, or is this anti-Semitism? So let's talk about it. Before we can even talk about what it is, let's first define what genocide is, right? No matter, whenever you have a debate with somebody or whenever you're talking about anything, you need to define the terms that you're using. So let's define genocide. What is genocide? So the actual definition of genocide, termed by Raphael Lemkin, who was a Polish Jewish lawyer who was around the time of World War II, escaped to America, he defined genocide as the intent of wiping out a nation or an entire ethnic group of people. What's a key word in this definition? Intent. The key word in the definition of genocide is the intention of wiping out an entire ethnic group of people. The best example of this is the Holocaust. This is where the term genocide was really coined from. It was based off of the Holocaust. And Hitler and his people, they wanted to decide. There's the Jewish problem. They were conquering territory and they had Jews, a lot of them all of a sudden. There was the Jewish question, is what do we do with these Jews? And they decided, they had a group meeting, it was full of PhDs and smart academics, and they sat together and they sat down and they said, okay, what are we gonna do about this? Just put them in concentration camps, let's kill them. Our solution to the Jewish problem is death. Their intention was to kill as many Jews as possible. And if you look at the data, the documents, they were very, very meticulous in their strategy. They were very particular. They managed to document where Jews were all over the world. There was a very small Jewish community in Greece at the time. It was made up of 30 Jews, and they managed to kill those Jews too. Their intention was to kill every single Jew off of the face of the earth. That was their intention. So that's the actual definition of genocide. As we know, terms get reused and abused. Queer is not cool. It used to not be cool. So genocide has an actual definition, but also a pragmatic definition, how it's being used in our society. The pragmatic definition of genocide isn't that, I would say. I think the pragmatic definition is, and this is my understanding, is that genocide is the indiscriminate killing of an ethnic group of people. It's not the intention, per se, but it's an indiscriminate killing. So many Palestinians are being killed. 40,000 Palestinians have been killed by the Israeli government. This is genocide, right? That's the accusation that we're hearing. It's not the intention per se, and yes, there are people who say that too, but there's a lot of people who just say it's an indiscriminate killing of Palestinian people, and that's their problem with the Israeli government. So we're going to talk about both of those things. The quick and easy one is for the actual, I don't know if you know this, but in 2005, Israel actually pulled out of Gaza and fully left. Gaza was no longer under Israel's sovereignty by 2005. So it was for over 15 years that Gaza was fully not under Israel control. What happened was there was an election. For some time, Hamas took over Gaza through elections, and they were the governor. They were the sovereign government of Gaza. Israel was not a part of Gaza at all, and this was not the first time that Israel actually gave up land for peace. The Sinai Peninsula in the 70s, they gave up as well for peace with Egypt, and since they gave up that land, there has been peace between Egypt and Israel. So, and even in the West Bank, and we're going to talk about that a little bit too, there are 3 areas of the West Bank that are controlled by different governments. Some is controlled by the PA, some is controlled by Israel, some is controlled by the PA and militarized by Israel. And so it has been throughout history, Israel has been giving up land for peace around the region. And so why would they give up land if they wanted to kill everybody there? Why would they leave their military if their intention was to wipe out Palestinians, wipe out Gazans? So that's the thing there. And then also if you look at population growth, they've been growing at a very steady rate, if not a higher rate than Israelis have been growing. And so then with the actual definition of genocide, it just really does not make any sense. So for that, it falls under the 3 Ds of antisemitism. The other one is more interesting. The other one is the pragmatic definition, the indiscriminate killing of Palestinian people. So let's talk about it. Right now, the data shows, and the data is from the Gaza Ministry of Health, which is Hamas, a terrorist organization, but we'll talk about that too. But let's take all the numbers that we have. So the Gaza Ministry of Health says that 40,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza. That's a lot of people. Israel says that they have killed over 17,000 Hamas terrorists in Gaza. Okay? So 40,000 minus 17. Okay. 19,000 missiles so far have been fired from Gaza into Israel. 12% of missiles that have been fired have not landed in Israel, and it's been misfires, and they landed in the Gaza enclave from Hamas and from the different terrorist groups and groups inside of Gaza. So 12% have fell inside of the Gaza enclave, and 19,000 have made it over. So if you do the math, that means that, I wrote this down, 2,300 rockets from Hamas have fallen into Gaza. So 2,300 rockets that are from Hamas have fallen inside the Gaza enclave. When rockets are shot into Israel, we know that Israel has an Iron Dome. So there's 19,000 rockets, which is an insane number of rockets to fire into a country the size of New Jersey, but very few of them have actually landed because of the Iron Dome. Gaza, on the other hand, does not have an Iron Dome. 2,300 missiles landed inside the Gaza enclave. The Gaza enclave is tiny, tiny. It's about 3 miles wide and about 8 miles long, I'm pretty sure. Israeli can correct me on that. I was wrong?
It's bigger.
It's bigger? Okay, still very, very small. So people will die when any rocket falls inside of Gaza. So let's just say almost 1 person died per rocket that fell, maybe sometimes 2. So let's say 3,000, okay, people from Gaza have died from misfires from Hamas. 70,000 plus 3,000 is 20,000. 40,000, which is the number that Gaza said, minus 20,000 is 20,000. That means that 20,000 civilians were killed at the hand of Israel, right? Based off of the numbers. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Is everyone following that? Okay, cool. So that means that for every 1 terrorist killed, 1 civilian is killed in Gaza. Okay? Cool. Why does this matter? Well, the Washington, D.C.'s Center for Civilians in Conflict says that on average, 90% of casualties from war are civilian casualties. Okay, so 90% of casualties usually in war are civilian. That means for every 1 terrorist that's killed in war, every 1 militant, whatever the war is, 9 people die. For every 1, it's 1 to 9. Israel has 1 to 1. Israel technically is 40% better, that means, than the norm in terms of warfare, especially urban warfare, because once again, Gaza is very, very small, so it's urban warfare. These are buildings that are sky high. There's millions of people living pretty much on top of each other. And somehow they managed to keep their civilian casualty rate 1-to-1, when on average it's 1-to-9. The world should be praising Israel for their strategy and their values of saving lives. It's not easy to bring the ratio down from 1-to-9 to 1-to-1. The fact that there's so much hate against Israel for committing a genocide when in actuality they're actually killing way less civilians than any other army has killed in the past. This is data from America. This is American data on armies that they have fought, that it's 1-to-9, and somehow Israel has managed to keep the ratio down 1-to-1 in an urban area? That's kind of crazy. Isn't that crazy? This is an example of a double standard. Israel is being held at a double standard that not only are they not allowed to, do any war, but not only that they're not allowed to do 1-to-9, but they can't even do 1-to-1. Israel's being held at a standard they can't kill any civilians when they're fighting urban warfare. People die in war. Unfortunately, it's terrible. People die in war. And somehow Israel has brought the ratio of death extremely, extremely down. Is it not demonizing Israel for the work that they're doing? And delegitimizing Israel for all the hard work, such as sending leaflets, creating safe zones. Have you ever heard in warfare of a safe zone? Has a safe zone ever existed in the wars that are happening in Ukraine or Russia? Does Ukraine and Russia have a safe zone? Does China have a safe zone with the Uyghur population? The concept of a safe zone was created by Israel to save civilian lives. This is not a norm. There is no such thing as a norm in warfare. Israel is creating all these different strategies to save civilian lives. Why isn't the world praising Israel for all the hard work that they're putting in not to kill civilians? The data shows that they're killing less civilians than on average by 8 times. So to me, criticizing Israel as a genocide is delegitimizing the hard work that they're doing. It's holding them at a double standard, and it's demonizing them because as anti-Semitism. So that's one. This is an example of being able to differentiate between anti-Semitism and fair criticism. The genocide example. All right, I'll do 2 more things because I don't know how much time I have and I want to open up to questions. Israel is an apartheid state. So this is another one I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard about. So let's first define the term apartheid. Cornell's definition of apartheid is a policy that is founded on the idea of separating people based on racial or ethnic criteria. Okay, that's the definition of apartheid. Why is Israel being called an apartheid? So usually when you guys hear this, I don't know how much history you know about Israel, but I'm assuming it has to do with not being Israeli civilians, because Israeli civilians do have equal rights, but I'm assuming it has to do with the West Bank, or aka Judea and Samaria. The West Bank is the British imperialist name for that area of land, because Palestine was also encompassed Jordan at the time under the British Empire. And so the West Bank is west of the Jordan Bank. And so when they talk about apartheid, they're talking about the people in the West Bank versus mainland Israel. So let's talk about the West Bank. All right, the West Bank was won by Israel in 1967. It was a defensive war against multiple Arab countries. And the problem was that when Israel got this land, it was a large Muslim population there. It wasn't a very Jewish area. And so in East Jerusalem in particular, this is closer to where mainland Israel is, East Jerusalem, they actually offered citizenship to all the Arabs in that area, all the Muslims in that area, and 90% declined citizenship of Israel. And right now, even to this day, they don't have full citizenship because they declined it, and they're just permanent residents of Israel. And they can work and they can do everything, but they're not technically citizens. So they declined citizenship of Israel. They didn't want to be a part of an Israel country. And so there's a problem with Israel is what to do with this land. What do you do with these people? Don't even want to be a part of Israel. What do you do? Fast forward to the 90s, and Oslo Accords, Yasser Arafat, if you don't know who that is, he was the leader of the Palestinian Authority, which is the first real formal Palestinian government that existed in this region. And what happened was there was an agreement that was made, the first agreement ever pretty much to be made with Palestinians, and those were the Oslo Accords. And what happened was, what they did was they divided the West Bank into 3 different territories. They divided territory A, B, and C. A was fully run, fully sovereign by the Palestinian Authority. So it was Palestinian, it was a Palestine state with Area A. Area B was run, government was Palestinian, and then it was militarized by Israel. And B, what happened was it was kind of like an enclave around Area C, which was fully Jewish, which was part of Israel. And the reason why B was militarized by Israel is because they wanted to protect the area, because there's an intifada, there's a lot of fighting between Palestinians, there's a lot of terrorism, and so they wanted to have a layer of protection, so Israel military wanted to be around Area C. And so that's kind of why B was there in the first place. But pretty much what happened was the West Bank isn't actually owned by Israel fully. It's been broken down. There's been an agreement, a peace agreement, that has been made between the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian government, and the Israeli government. And so this area has been divided. So once again, going back more into the nuance, it's more complicated. So let's talk about that. If let's say someone is in Canada and they want to come into America, what do you need to come into America as a Canadian? A visa, a passport. Can you just walk into America? No? Is that apartheid? Why? So?
The definition is within a state for apartheid.
Okay, so it has to be under the same government for it to be apartheid. Well, the wall that people refer to in Israel that's dividing these different territories is dividing different governments. They're not run by the same government. One is run by Israel and one is run by the PA. Is that apartheid? If they can't freely go between both of those areas without proper identification, without proper permission? Israelis can't go into the Palestinian Authority territory. They're not allowed to. And they'd be killed if they do. The Israeli just said they'd be killed if they do. And Palestinian Authority, they need work visas, they need permission to come. They need a visa, they need a passport, they need permission to come into Israel. Is that apartheid? They're 2 separate governments. Okay. Double standard. Another example, and this one is even worse than what's happening in the West Bank. Puerto Rico. What is Puerto Rico? Is it a state of America? No. It's a U.S. territory, right? Puerto Ricans it's a part of America. Its government is American, but are they able to vote for who the president is? Are they able to be represented in Congress? To me, that sounds like an apartheid against the Puerto Ricans. Israel is being held at a double standard, is being demonized for the peace that it actually made, and delegitimized for the peace that it actually made with the Palestinian Authority by creating these territories, by separating the land. It's being delegitimized when it's being called an apartheid state, because it is not committing an apartheid. So this is another example of the 3 Ds of anti-Semitism. And this is another example of what is fair criticism versus what is anti-Semitism. Okay, and yes, another thing to say too that's really important is that there's racism and extremism in every country. Is there not racism and extremism in America, where there are crazies here too? Nazi lovers, racists, everything. They exist in Israel too. But tell me one country that doesn't have an extremist racist person. Right? They all exist everywhere. And so they're going to be in Israel and they're going to be in America, but when we hold Israel at this higher standard than everybody else, that's when it becomes anti-Semitism. Okay, now I'm going to do a quick rapid fire with a little bit more things I think is relevant for you guys. So Israel is a colonial state. Israel lives on stolen land. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, right? I'm sure you've all heard that before. Was Ilhan Omar, I hope you guys know who that is, was Ilhan Omar stealing land when she moved to America from Somalia as an immigrant? Is that stealing land when you move to a place as an immigrant, legally? Is that stealing land? Well, in the 1856 Ottoman Land Code, the Sultan at the time, wanted to modernize, and he was becoming friends with a lot of Western countries. And for the first time in the Ottoman Empire, they passed this land code that allowed for foreigners to buy land. Up until that time, you had to be Muslim to buy land under the Ottoman Empire. There were Jews in the Ottoman Empire, but they weren't able to buy land. They were considered second-class citizens. But actually, fun fact is that Jews were historically treated better under the Ottoman Empire than in Europe and a lot of other places in the world. Even though they were second-class citizens, at least they were second and not non-citizens. But in 1856, there was this land code that was passed where anybody, any foreigner, can come to any Ottoman territory and purchase land. And guess who was ecstatic to hear about that? The Jews. Why were they ecstatic to hear about that? Because they were in Eastern Europe and they were facing pogrom after pogrom where they were being killed off and raped and tortured all the time. And the second they found out that their ancestral homeland was up for grabs, they went down there. I don't know if you guys read Mark Twain, but around this time, Mark Twain went to Jerusalem because he was obsessed with Palestine, which is a fun fact. And if you read his journal entries about Jerusalem, he's like, it's barren land, it's dirty, there's nobody here, because there wasn't much to it at the time. It was like kind of like Mecca in like the early, by the time that Muhammad was born, it wasn't a very nice place to be. People just went there to do the religious services. You know, like there was like the religious services that were there, but it wasn't a thriving city. It was barren, it was dirty. And now, all of a sudden, you have this wave of Jewish immigrants coming in from all over the world, escaping persecution, and building kibbutzim, which you probably heard about kibbutzim. For example, kibbutz Be'eri, which was ravaged by Hamas terrorists, was around this time. It was founded in the late 1800s. So it started when it was still Palestine, it was pre-British Mandate, it was during the Ottoman Empire that this kibbutz started. It was a land that was purchased by Jewish immigrants into the land of Palestine, and they built this beautiful farm in this beautiful area, and the farm was still thriving by the time that Hamas attacked it. It wasn't, post-Israel colonialism. It existed for a very long time. And a lot of Israel existed for a very long time too. Jewish people existed there for a very long time. So when we say that Israel is colonized, we're forgetting the fact that Jewish people, they are an ethnic religious group that is tied to a specific geographical location, which is the land of Israel. L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. This is the quote that expresses Judaism. It means next year in Jerusalem. And throughout, as a very practicing religious Jewish person in the past, I know that the whole religion stems around the land of Israel. Our religion is tied to this land. Okay, but even so, what about the Arabs of the land and when the nation was founded? So let's talk about that too. Really quickly, the UN partition plan of Palestine, after the British Mandate left Israel, there was a vacuum of power in this area. There was a lot of Jews that lived there because a lot of them moved there during the time of the Ottoman Empire, during the time of the British Mandate, and there's a lot of Arabs. And so the UN decided to partition the land and create an area for the Jews and an area for the Arabs. Israel, the Jewish state, accepted that partition plan. The Arabs did not accept it because they wanted all of the land. And so what happened? Once that didn't solve the solution, there was a vacuum of power again, and somebody had to declare sovereignty. Israel declared sovereignty of that territory, and when that happened, there was a war. All the Arab surrounding states started to attack the Jewish state, and Jews won. They won. And because they won, that's when they were declared independent, and they were recognized by the UN as a sovereign state. What else was founded during this time, post World War II? South Korea was founded in 1948. Pakistan and Bangladesh was also founded during this time. There's a lot of states that were founded in the 1947-1948 period that were all recognized as sovereign states. So when we talk about Zionism, are you pro-Zionism, are you anti-Zionism? To me, it doesn't even matter anymore, because yes, we could have talked about that in the 40s before Israel was a state, when we're talking about creating a state for the Jewish people to exist, that also, by the way, the state, once again, encompasses all people of all different religions. And if you've ever read the Declaration of Independence of Israel, it says any woman, any man, has equal rights. It's very progressive, because once again, this was made by people coming from socialism in Eastern Europe, and so that's why the kibbutzim, they were socialists. It was very progressive. It was a very progressive group of people. What was I saying?
Progressive.
Anti-Zionism. Oh yeah, thank you. So when we're talking about anti-Zionism and pro-Zionism, to me, Israel already exists. You can't really be anti-Zionist or you can't really be Zionist per se, in my opinion, because it already exists. It's a state, it's a country. If you're born in Israel, you're Israeli. There's people who are born there. They've been born there for the past, over almost 80 years, where this country has 10 million people that live there. So it's not really about Zionism is an idea. The idea that Jews have the right to a state, but they already have it. It already exists. So to me, you can't really be, anti that because it already exists. So the only way for you to be anti-Zionist is for you to say that you are pro the destruction of the state. And if you're pro the destruction of the state, then you're pro the destruction of the people, because all the surrounding nations have said that they don't want Jews there. And so if you're pro the destruction of 8 million people, then you're pro the genocide, the second genocide of the Jews. So being anti-Zionism to me means literally saying, yes, it's okay if there's another Jewish genocide, because they're already there. There's already millions of them there. Being Zionist to me means, cool, you can be Zionist. To me, it has nothing to really do with Israel because Israel already exists. So that's my personal opinion on Zionism. All right. Another thing that I'm sure you guys hear a lot is ceasefire now, and talking about that. So now we have to talk about Hamas. So I'm just going to give a really quick history on who Hamas is, because Hamas, like I said, is the government of Gaza. So Hamas is a death cult, pretty much. That's a great way to put it. I don't know if any of you guys have read the charter that they released on what their values are. I read their charter, and I'm going to read to you a quote from it. But pretty much just some history about Hamas is that they were formerly known as the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's an Islamic resistance movement. It's an Islamic resistance movement. This is really key. Do you notice how I never mentioned anything about Palestine? The Muslim Brotherhood actually was founded in Egypt in the 80s, so it's not Palestinian. It was an Egyptian movement that was about spreading the jihad. It was about the caliphate. It was an extremist Muslim ideology that was, wanted to, of course, get rid of Israel because there are Jews there and they don't want Jews to be in this area. They want it to be Islamic extremist. They want to make the world Muslim. That's what a caliphate is making the entire world Muslim under strict Sharia law. And so a direct quote from the charter is, I'm going to read to you, is, "The Prophet, Allah bless him and grant him salvation, has said, the day of judgment will not come about until Muslims fight the Jews, killing the Jews, and when the Jews will hide behind stones and trees, the stones and trees will say, O Muslims, O Abdullah, there is a Jew behind me, come and kill him." This is a direct quote from the charter of Hamas. What stands out to you about this declaration?
Doesn't speak about Israel, speaks about the Jews directly.
Okay, yeah. Anything else?
It's about killing.
It's about killing. What is Hamas's intention?
Genocide.
Their intention is genocide. They have stated that their intention is to kill a Jew, kill Jews. They have said, my intention, this is public, you can Google this. Google Hamas charter, Hamas original charter. If you Google their charter, it says, my intention is to kill the Jews. That is genocide. Double standard. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is that it puts all the weight on Israel and not on Hamas when their intention is genocide. So imagine, as a government, you've been ravaged on one day, on October 7th. Thousands of militants came into Israel, killing, torturing, raping. The stories are really, really, really terrible. Terrible, terrible. And this group of people, their intention is to commit genocide. Their intention is to kill and torture as many Jewish people as possible, as many Israelis as possible. It didn't matter if you're Israeli, it didn't matter if you're Jewish, Muslim, Bedouin, Druze, it didn't matter, Christian. They killed whoever was in their way. And they stated that this is their intention. So imagine trying to create some sort of agreement with people who have stated that their intention is for you to die. All right, I only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to move on. This is the last thing that I think is really important. So I want to talk about the media. So as you know, what I'm saying, I think makes some sense, I hope, but maybe you guys have never heard this perspective. Has anybody heard this perspective before? A few hands? Okay, we have a few hands. Yeah, so this perspective that I'm sharing with you isn't a common perspective. Why is it not common? Because I don't think I'm saying anything that sounds particularly crazy for the most part. So why isn't this being talked about? Well, you guys are all Stanford students. You know that we have 3 branches of our government, right? Yeah. What are the 3 branches of government? Does anyone want to say them?
Judicial, executive, legislative.
Great. Judicial, executive, legislative. Awesome. What if I told you that we have 4 branches of government? Can anybody guess what the 4th branch of government would be? Media. Is the media, so you know each branch of government, the reason we have multiple branches of government, as you know, is to, create a balance of powers. So sometimes the judicial branch is leaning more to the right, and sometimes the executive branch is left, and so it's a balance of powers, right? It's like the goal is like bipartisan policy, right? What political leaning is the media? If it's a branch of government, it has a political leaning. What's the leaning of the media? The left. Okay. The media, why is it a branch of government? The media has the ability to frame the narrative of anything, right? Especially political issues. That's why they're a branch of government, because they have power over the population. That's very, very powerful, especially today, especially when we're such an online economy. We're so online, so the media has so much power over the public opinion. And the public opinion, the media is left. Okay, why does that matter? Why it's left, we can talk about it. I'm gonna honestly just skip this part because we don't have time. There's reasons why it's left. I'm skipping why. The point is that the left hasn't really been on our side when it comes to Israel, hasn't been pro-Israel. That's a better way to put it. The left hasn't really been pro-Israel. They haven't really been saying this perspective. Why the left hasn't really been pro-Israel, also a story for another time. Really, really quickly, very long story, but from talking to Dr. Basmalani, he gave me his perspective on it, because he's super liberal, technically, but he's not progressive like the left is today, and he believes in Israel, but he's talking about postmodern. He gave me these very academic terms. He said postmodern reactionaries and postmodern theologists believe the same thing. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? He was first saying that Khomeini, which is the leader of the IRI, the Islamic Revolutionary, the Iranian Revolutionary government, and the reactionaries, postmodern reactionaries, is pretty much us for the most part. He was like, we're postmodern. We're trying to figure out capitalism's bad. Colonialism, we're trying to figure out what to do with all the power that we now have as individuals in this country. He's saying that they want the same thing, and that's what's happening. We all want the same thing, and that's to get rid of the society as we know it today. For Khomeini, it's always been through theology, is going back to the religious ideals, and that's what it's Islamism under Sharia law is, and that's what's been happening to Iran and the Taliban in Afghanistan. And then for our society, it's been more Marxism and trying to find another way that makes more sense, that's more inclusive. But they want the same thing at the end of the day. I still don't understand that, to be honest with you, but I'm just sharing with you. I heard this today. It's very interesting. But the point is that we only are getting one narrative in the media. That's the point. The point is that we're only getting one narrative. We're getting the left narrative, and the left narrative has consistently not been pro-Israel or even interested in recognizing Israel's right to exist. It's been very one way. And so I just want you to understand that it's one narrative that you're getting from the media at large. And so the takeaways from this talk is to be able to read the news and be able to figure out what is fair criticism of Israel, or what is the 3Ds of anti-Semitism. What are the 3Ds of anti-Semitism?
Delegitimization, double standard, demonization.
Amazing. And to know that the media is one narrative. And that's pretty much it. So thank you for listening to my spiel.
So I'll just say thank you so much to Miriam Haart again. Okay, so basically after this, we have a session with whoever go to the LA Nova exhibition. So if that's okay with you guys, we're gonna take a few seconds for questions, because I feel like maybe people want to ask Miriam some questions. So we have time for 3-4 questions, no more. So
I think
Miriam.
we can probably do 10-15 minutes of questions.
Great.
Okay, so
Yeah.
let's take
And
10
let's-
minutes for
no,
some
so
questions.
yeah.
I'm not arguing it either way here, but I'm trying to understand why criticism of the Israeli government directly translates to criticism of Judaism. And to me, it would seem almost like criticizing or blaming all Russians for Putin deciding to invade Ukraine.
That's a great question. I think that's exactly what I'm trying to talk about. That's where the anti-Semitism comes in. Like when you tie Jews, all Jews, to something that the Israeli government did, that's anti-Semitism. That's lumping being anti the Israeli government to anti-Jews. And that's kind of like the problem that we're facing right now in our society. That's why Jews are getting attacked frequently. It doesn't make sense. That's where the anti-Semitism comes in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what I'm thinking. The follow-up then is, I think a lot of the perspectives that I've heard that are pro-Israeli or pro-Israel Israel as a state is that being against Israel is being against Judaism. And that it almost doesn't allow someone to be critical of the Israeli government without immediately classifying them as critical of Judaism. Does that make sense?
So you're saying like it goes the other way too. So that you can't. So yeah, I think that comes down to like wording. You know, we don't really say when we're anti-Trump, we don't say we're anti-America. You know, so being anti-Israel is like saying I'm anti-America. And so I think the wording matters too when it comes to this, and we have to be more intentional about like how we frame what we're saying, because I'm not anti-American, I'm pro-American. You know, because I believe in American sovereignty, I believe in this country, just like I believe in Israel, and I believe in Israeli sovereignty. But for some reason we've normalized saying anti-Israel. But it's not Israel, it's the government. If we have problems, and it's not even the government. It's not like we're anti-American government, it's anti-Netanyahu's policies. You know, just like we're anti-Trump policies, or like different politicians. So we really need to be more intentional with how we frame it, because otherwise it does come off as anti-Semitic. And so, but it's just been normalized to say it like that, so I understand why people do it. And when you say you're pro-Israel, it's like you're saying pro-America. You're just pro the right for this country to exist and thrive. You know, like it doesn't mean you're pro the government, it doesn't mean you're pro Netanyahu, you're just pro the idea that this country should be able to survive. Like that's, I think looking more at the technical definitions of those words can help. Yeah, does that help? We good? I think there's, yeah.
A lot of the arguments I've heard about Israel being an apartheid government didn't actually come from like borders or like police regulated region. The most I have heard come from the judicial system that's available in the region, that like Palestinians being discriminated against in law, that's like in constitution, versus Israel is kind of like benefiting more.
Okay.
Especially I've seen a lot of arguments focusing on like how people get very dramatically different punishments for the same kinds of crimes, versus and like another thing was like the incarceration rates, like they looked roughly similar to how we talk about like the black incarceration, you know, like Hispanic incarceration in the States against Palestinians, and I've never heard anyone from the Israeli side speaking about this. Would you mind saying anything?
Yeah, that's really, so I have a question, just a follow-up to understand.
like to say something after.
Okay. Oh, for this? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so first, when you say Palestinian, who are you referring to exactly? So, like that's
Non-citizen residents
non-citizen residents. So,
of Israel, Palestinian residents of Israel.
okay, so you're not referring to.
And I'm not an expert on this subject. I'm asking with good intent.
No.
Yeah.
All good. Ask any question, please. This is a brave space. That's what I can say. Okay, so once again, it's very difficult to answer it in a very short, concise answer, because I really like defining everything before I give an answer, and we have to define still Palestinian, because there are Muslim Israelis, right? And a lot of them identify as Palestinian. A lot of them hold that identity of Palestinian Israelis. And so they have equal rights technically under judicial Israeli law. But then there's also, like you said, people who don't, right? But those are the people from the West Bank. So it is connected to the West Bank, and it is all across territory borders then, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so then if it is across territory borders, then doesn't that mean that they're under different governments and therefore they have different rights?
So are you saying that like the Israeli government has the right to, like, how do I say? If, like, let's say I'm a resident alien here and I'm a US citizen, does that justify me being punished more than an American while I'm in this country for the same kind of crime?
So is that's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, can you give me an example? Like, do you want to say something on this?
Yeah, first of all, there is a lot of Muslims inside Israel that identify themselves like Palestinians. But those guys, those folks, you can find them in the Knesset. It's like the parliament in Israel. You can find them in the Supreme Court. There is the Muslims in the Supreme Court. So there is a lot of Muslim judges inside Israel. And actually, we always try to put at least one seat for a Muslim that identifies itself as a Palestinian in the judicial system, in the Supreme Court, for prevent such events that you are talking about. So when people say that there is, I don't know, there is apartheid or something like this, it's wrong because they take part of our laws, but they are in the parliament. They are in the last government. One of the parties was the Palestinian Muslim party, and there was with the coalition. Coalition is like they made the majority of the Congress. They could move laws. They could do everything. So they have the same right to vote. They have the same right to do all the things. And the people the Palestinians that from abroad, like not from Israel, they get the same punishment. The only difference is the arrestment itself, and actually it's right for Israelis too. It's not different, but like there is a lot of I don't know how to say it, but it means arrested by the army. So if you are doing a terrorist act, so you can be arrested without being before a court. For a part of time, it's like for a month or something like this. Then you need to be in front of a judge. And this kind of harassments, it's happened also to Israelis that making terror activities against Muslims in Judah and Samaria. So there is no apartheid at all. There is the people that say that there is different laws for Jews and for Muslims or for Palestinians or for Israel. It's lie. The only difference is you can work in Israel, and if you are can vote to the parliament, and that's it.
Why can't Palestine just be where it is? Like, what is I'm pretty uneducated about it, but like, what is the whole fight about? Like, I know it's like a very religious space for like both like countries or I don't know states, but like why can't Palestine just be there?
So when you say there, are you talking about like
the location that it's been at?
like where it's at right now? You're
Yeah.
saying like why can't it just like be fine there? Like
Yeah.
that's great question. Seriously, great question. And there has been like over 10 times that the Israeli government and like whoever is running Palestine have tried to sign an agreement to be like, let's just both coexist. Let's just both be here and be fine. But unfortunately, and this is where the problem really stems, is that there's been so much like indoctrination and extremism that like Palestinians, or the government at least, and Iran is remember that Iran, which is a very extreme government, is funding a lot of these people, and they're pretty much promoting the idea that Jews aren't allowed here, and that Israel is not allowed here. And so therefore, there's just war, because they don't want, unfortunately, to coexist with Israel. So they don't want there to be a Palestine and an Israel. They just want there to be a single Palestinian state. So that's the problem. So like, for example, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Have you heard that before? So from the river to the sea, do you know what river, what sea?
No.
That's okay. Most people don't. The river is referring to the Jordan River, and the sea is referring to the Mediterranean Sea. That area of land from the river to the sea, that area is the entire state of Israel, meaning that there's no two-state solution. It's all of Israel should be Palestine. So that means war, right? Because that means that they want to fight Israel. So unfortunately, a lot of people would like that, and I want that, and many of the people that I met today that are from the region want that too. But unfortunately, the rulers of these areas don't want that. The rulers of the PA and the rulers of Gaza, which is Hamas, they don't want that. They've said that they want to kill all Jews. That's what they said. So that's a problem.
Okay, one last question.
Yeah.
I feel like you gave really great summaries about like things that are like stemming from anti-Semitism. Do you have, like, just out of curiosity, some examples from the media that is like on the other end, like examples that are fair criticism of the Israeli government?
Yeah, I mean, I personally, a lot of criticism of Netanyahu is fair, not a lot, but like there's a lot of criticism in general that is fair criticism. There is still racism in Israel, you know? For example, the Ethiopian community has never fully like gotten a grip, you know, has never fully integrated into Israeli society like the Russian community has. So there's a lot of areas in Israel that need improvement. Another thing that we can talk about too is like women's rights. Like they have women's rights in Israel is really good relative to the Middle East, really relative to the world. But there are certain things that I can think of, like marriage contracts, where there's certain laws in Israel that are just not good. These are like, you know, that if I was an Israeli citizen, I would be marching for women's rights and wanting to promote that better. And like just like we march in the streets here for fighting against abortion and like, you know, things like that. So yeah, there's a lot that Israel can improve on. It's far from a perfect state, but it's far from a perfect state like America is far from a perfect state. Yeah. If anybody doesn't know or hasn't heard of the Free Press, I really recommend reading that as well, along with your other media sources. I really like it. It's a very, very nuanced. They go in, like they get dirty with the material. So it's called thefp.com, and I'm a big advocate of the Free Press. So, yeah.
Yay! Thank you.